back to the problem set. 86, we're going to go with Kayla.
A hormone that helps regulate the sodium ion content of the body is aldosterone.
Aldosterone is correct, right? So the job of aldosterone is reabsorption of sodium. And when you reabsorb sodium, water follows along with it. Where does it occur? It usually occurs on the nephron, right? So you have the nephron where you make your urine, right? So aldosterone acts on the kidney or the nephron, and its job to reabsorb salt and water. When we do next lecture for renal control, right, of the blood pressure, we're going to learn a lot about aldosterone, about renin, right, about angiotensin 1 and 2 and their response, right, and the blood pressure management. That is very, very, very important, right? But what you want to keep in mind, aldosterone, the major functions is retention of sodium. If you retain sodium, meaning less sodium is leaving the kidney, you're reabsorbing it back to go in the blood. If you absorb sodium, water follows along with it, right? And that will basically, if you do that, it will bring up your blood pressure or maintain your blood pressure at least. Okay. 89, we're going to go with Lindsay.
Reduction of fluid losses at the kidney due to the retention of Na plus is the action of antidiuretic hormone.
So here it's specific, right? Retention of sodium. So if
retains, so then the aldosterone?
Correct, aldosterone, right? The reduction of fluid loss by itself would be antidiuretic hormone. But when they say secondary to retention of sodium, what retains sodium? Aldosterone retains sodium, right? So keep that in mind, right? This is more specific. All right, 90, we are at Larry. Larry, would you like to go? Your microphone is muted, Larry. Just unmute yourself.
The adrenal produces the hormones epi and androgen.
So it does not produce androgens, right? But it produces something else. Kayla, you want to help us?
Norepi?
Epi and norepi.
Epi and norepi, yeah. So predominantly it's epi, right? Maybe 20% of this, 80% of this. All right, very good. 91, we are now. Oh, Irene. Irene, would you like to go 91?
Yes, please. Forgive me for being late, but I was too busy watching your previous
That's
tapes.
Okay. That's okay.
The adrenal, yeah, okay, we did the adrenal. 91, you said, which of the following hormones increases and prolongs effects of the sympathetic nervous system? It has to be epinephrine.
Epinephrine is correct, right? Yes.
Okay.
That's direct, right?
Yeah, that was easy.
99. Oh, I'm glad you say that. 99. Ian, 99.
Pancreatic hormone that causes blood sugar levels to fall is C.
You said C? I didn't
C, right? Because it's
insulin, right?
Yeah.
That is correct, right? So pancreatic hormone that causes blood sugar levels to fall is insulin, right? So usually you have insulin that's secreted when you have high sugar levels, right? Secreted by the pancreas, specifically being the beta cells, right? Okay. 100, we're going to go with Milan.
When blood glucose levels fall, glucagon is released.
Glucagon is released, right? And we have this medication, right? We give it in the setting of diabetes mellitus when we cannot get IV access, or we couldn't get IV access. And we give glucagon because it mobilizes our glycogen storage, our counter-regulatory hormones. If you remember, right, you guys doing ECG, right? ECG. If you add another G, this is your counter-regulatory hormones, as long as you remember ECG, G. So this is your epi. This is your cortisol. this is your glucagon, and this is your growth hormone. So all of these are your counter-regulatory hormones. They're released when your blood glucose level falls, right? So usually these are the hormones that are being released, and they will stimulate your liver to make more glucose by breaking glycogen stores. That's called glycogenolysis, right? As the process continues, it's going to start to make glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. That's called gluconeogenesis, neo meaning new sources, like amino acids, fatty acids, right? But all of these hormones are the ones that are secreted. By the way, since we are on it, this epi is secreted by adrenal medulla, right? This is secreted by the adrenal cortex, right? The top portion. Glucagon secreted by the alpha cells of the pancreas. And GH is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. Right? So these are the hormones that are secreted. All right, 101. We are at Jackson is next. Jackson, are you here?
Sorry, I thought my muted. The beta cells, the pancreatic islets
Islets.
Produce blank which blank blood sugar.
So the key here is this. What do beta cells make?
Pretty sure that A.
A is correct, right? Beta cells make insulin, which then lowers the blood sugar level, right? Very good. So 101 is A. Kayla for 103.
The exocrine portion of the pancreas produces digestive enzymes.
Yeah, very good. And by the way, here's a question for you guys, right? So the exocrine portion of the pancreas produces digestive enzymes like lipase, right? Amylase, as the protease. So basically all the enzymes that chop up all your proteins, fats, right? Carbohydrates. But my question is, right? What about your endocrine secretions from the pancreas? So pancreas has your endocrine secretions, which is your hormones, right? Predominantly insulin and glucagon. Where do these get secreted? Do they get secreted the same place these are, digestive enzymes? Right? Do they go in the same location? So these go into your duodenum, right? The small intestine. Are these secreted in the same place? Meaning once they come out, do they go into small intestine?
No, into the bloodstream.
Into the bloodstream, right? Very good. That's very important to keep in mind, right? So lipase, amylase, protease, they get secreted into the duodenum, the small intestine, to chop up all your, carbohydrates, fats, proteins. But insulin, glucagon, they are uptaken into the capillaries, and then they go into the bloodstream, and they circulate in the bloodstream. That's why we call them the endocrine hormones. They are not, I repeat, they do not get secreted in the same location as the digestive enzymes. Okay, 105, we have Lindsay.
The pancreatic hormone that causes blood sugar to enter target cells is B, insulin.
Insulin is correct. And do you remember there's specific cells, right, we talked about in the body with specific receptors where insulin acts. Do you remember them, Lindsay? Which cells and which transporters?
I can't remember the name. I remember you drawing them out and what they look like, but I can't remember what they're called.
Okay, so the predominant places where insulin acts is muscle, and the other, right, is being the adipose cells.
Oh, I was thinking of something else. Yeah, that's good.
Right, or adipose fat cells, same thing. And the receptors that it's going to work on, it's essentially glucose type 4 transporters. And what these are is basically inside the cell, right, is basically these glucose transporters type 4 are inside. When the insulin binds here, right, is going to cause those secondary messengers. And these glucose type 4 transporters are going to be expressed on the membrane surface. And then glucose, right, can come in from the outside to inside the cell, specifically muscle, and into the adipocytes, right? So glucose can come here. And, so this is the insulin response. There is a couple of locations right in our body where glucose transport is so important that it's not under the mercy of insulin, right? Where that may be, which organ in the body is so important that we cannot have insulin, right, play a role in absorption of glucose.
That's the brain. Heart.
Yeah, brain and red blood cells. That's what you want to remember, right? Central nervous system and red blood cells, they can uptake glucose without insulin binding. They have glucose type 1, and type 3 transporters. These are not insulin mediated, right? So they can basically absorb glucose as needed, right? Our central nervous system utilizes a lot of glucose to drive, right? Let's say it's ATP functions, sodium potassium ATPases, right? And other metabolic functions, right? Same thing for red blood cells. Red blood cells also like mitochondria, so it can only do glycolysis. But glucose type 1 and 3 are found in central nervous system and your brain and red blood cells. Glucose type 4 are found in muscle, and they're found in the adipocytes. There is another organ, right, that has glucose type 2, right? These are two-way transporters. What would be one of the most important organs that has glucose type 2 transporters? Well, there's a couple
Pancreas.
of them, but
Pancreas.
Pancreas, right? Because it has to sense the sugar, so it has to be two-way, right? It has to know when to release insulin, has to know when to release glucagon, right? The other ones being your liver, your kidney, right, and your intestines, or you could say just GI tract, right? Why these organs? Because they can perform some of breakdown of glucose and releasing glycogen stores, right? So that's called glucogenolysis, right? So this is the method it does by chopping down glycogen stores and releasing them in the blood. So glucose type 2, right? The way to remember is a two-way transporter. It can go either way, both ways. The pancreas has them. Why? Because it has to sense the sugar content, right? To know, should I secrete insulin? Should I secrete glucagon? I secrete insulin when sugar levels are high. I secrete glucagon when sugar levels are low. Glucagon, right? And then the other organs that also have glucose type 2 transporters would be liver, kidney, and GI tract, right? Some small intestines. And they basically could do, they could chop up glycogen stores by glucogenolysis, right? So this is important. This organ can also do gluconeogenesis. So that's why also glucose type 2 transporter becomes vital there. All right. 107, we are up to Irene.
Okay. Alpha cells are to glucagon.
Okay.
As beta cells are to insulin. A.
Very good. Very good. You said A, right?
A, alpha, yeah.
So yeah, alpha cells make glucagon and beta cells make insulin. This is what is the role of the pancreas, and pancreas has, right, glucose type 2 transporters, which we just explained. So good. 111, we are back to Ian.
Okay. Melatonin is produced by the hello?
Which one?
I said B.
B. Oh yeah, B is correct. Pineal gland, right? So melatonin responsible for our circadian rhythms, right? Help us sleep, right? So secreted by the pineal gland in the central nervous system. All right. 114 is Milan.
The term used to describe excess production of urine is polyuria.
Polyuria, right? Yeah. So polyuria is correct. Is A. All right. So we finished number 114. 114 was A, polyuria. 115, we're going to go with Ian.
Okay, which of the following might occur in an overdose of insulin? D, low blood
Glucose is correct, right? So yes. 116, we're going to go with Milan.
A person with untreated diabetes mellitus may exhibit all of the following symptoms except glucosuria.
So they basically like
this question. Yeah.
This question is basically saying like you have a diabetic patient who is not making insulin, and they're not getting treatment for it. So basically, they're not getting insulin, right? So if they're not getting insulin, right, they will have high glucose in the bloodstream. Makes sense, right?
So
they'll have excessive thirst. Why? Because if they're peeing out a lot of high glucose, right, in the urine, right, they will become thirsty. That's called polydipsia, right? So excessive thirst, polydipsia. They'll have glucosuria. Why? Because they have a lot of glucose in their circulation, and the body starts to dump glucose in the urine, right? Because of the osmotic diuresis. And because of this, they have polyuria, right? So if they're not getting treated, what they will not usually have, they will not have low sugar, right? Hypoglycemia is usually low sugar, and that's when do you see that? That's usually you see that is when either a diabetic person inappropriately took a lot of insulin and they didn't eat, right? And so you will see, drop in their glucose level, hypoglycemia. But usually if they did not take the insulin, you will see all of these, right? All of these go up. All right. Any questions about this one? All right. 117, we are going to go with Kayla.
If a diabetic patient received too much insulin, the low blood sugar could be corrected by injecting a glucagon.
Glucagon is correct, right? But just so you guys are cognizant, if you give this, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. One of the calls I had a patient who was scheduled for colonoscopy, right? The provider there told him, the doctor there told him, I do not want you to eat anything, right? Do not eat anything before your appointment. But the guy knows, right? You got to take his insulin because probably the teaching he got, which is correct teaching, they said you got to take your insulin no matter what, because if you don't take your insulin, besides driving your sugar into the cells, you need to stave off the development of DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. So you stop the lipolysis from developing, right? So you got to take your insulin. So this guy took his insulin, right, and he went into basically in a coma, right? He was hypoglycemic upon arrival. So, we were trying to get IV access. We were trying to find. In the meantime, we gave him glucagon, right, because it wasn't an easy, it wasn't easy IV access just yet. But he did not all of a sudden develop, he didn't come back, right, alert and all that. And why do you suppose this is? We gave him glucagon IM, but this guy did not start to come back.
The insulin was uptaking the glucagon.
The insulin did not uptake the glucagon. There's something else that's going on, right? What does glucagon need to work on?
He didn't have any glycogen stored.
Excellent. Ari is 100%, right? I was going to write Ari. Ari is 100% on the money, right? He did not have any glycogen stores. His glycogen stores were gone. So imagine you have a guy who is going to go get done his colonoscopy. He's not eating, right? your glycogen stores are basically used up within 24 hours. And if he had, not too, he did not eat, right? And maybe his diet wasn't, significant to begin with, his glycogen stores are not there. If you have no glycogen stores in your liver, you could give your glucagon, you're not going to see a response, right? Because you have no glycogen stores for glucagon to break up. So we eventually got IV access. We gave him dextrose. We gave him two dextrose ampules of D50.
Nico?
Yeah.
Question, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the fact that we don't have the stores, the glycogen stores, wouldn't that now activate glycogenolysis?
That is correct, right? But it takes some time for it to start, working. That is correct, right?
Thank you.
But in his case, right, he wasn't in DKA state. He was in hypoglycemic coma. Why? Because he took his insulin, but he wasn't eating at all. So, that provider, the doctor who was doing the colonoscopy, right, he should have, informed them, right? Even though you're not eating like big meals, you should still take sugar to counteract your insulin consumption, right? Your insulin injections, I should say. So be cognizant. So if you give glucagon and there's no response, right? Maybe there's no glycogen stores. You could see that also in alcoholics who consume heavy amounts of alcohol. They're not eating at all, right? They may become hypoglycemic. You're trying to get IV access. You cannot get IV access. You give them glucagon and you see no response, right? Right. They also may need other things, right? That the body needs to absorb that. Like we used to give them a coma. We should call it like a coma cocktail, right? It was Narcan, thiamine. You need thiamine to basically utilize the glucose to absorb it, right? Essentially for your NADPH carriers to basically utilize the glucose, right, to make ATP. So they're thiamine deficient, right? So we give them like a coma cocktail initially in the hospital. But yes, glucagon works on your glycogen stores to basically mobilize them, break them up, chop them up. If you have no glycogen, right, you're not going to see any effects. By the way, this also works in a beta block overdose, but you need very high amounts of this, which we do not carry in our ambulance. 148, we are up to Irene, I think.
Okay, define hormone receptor. I like A. Hormone receptor is a protein located outside the cell that binds with a specific hormone.
Okay, so that's a good definition, but there's a better definition.
See?
A hormone receptor is a protein located outside or inside the cell that binds.
Oh, it can be inside.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you may have hormones like steroid hormones that bypass the lipid membrane. There's no receptor on the lipid membrane. They go inside the cell, right?
That's true.
So
Forgot about that.
Right. So always try to find a choice that has all the inclusive. So 148 will be D.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian for 159.
Okay.
Decreased blood calcium level would result in increased secretion of which hormone? A, parathyroid hormone?
Yeah, that is correct. So low calcium, right? Parathyroid is secreted, mobilize or reserve bone, right? In order to get your calcium, also less secretion in the kidneys. So good. 161, we are going to go with, we're back to Ian.
What effect would increased cortisol levels have on blood glucose level? I put A, increased cortisol levels will increase blood.
Yeah, very good. They will increase blood glucose. Cortisol is our counter-regulatory hormone, right? Which I drew out, right? So yes, it will work to increase blood glucose level in a setting, right? When you have, let's say, maybe no insulin, right? And you did not take any insulin. 164, we're going to go with Milan.
What is the effect of increased glucagon levels on the amount of glycogen stored in the liver? That would be B. Glucagon will decrease the amount of glycogen in the liver.
Yeah, because the moment we give glucagon, right, it's going to break up glycogen. It's going to chop up glycogen. And we need that basically chopped up glycogen because it's going to be glucose, which we ideally want to utilize in the setting of hypoglycemia, right? So that's what we are doing. By the way, if you are in the setting of hypoglycemia and the patient's altered mental status, do not give them oral glucose in a buccal method, right? They can aspirate it, right? So unless they alert, they can follow directions. Do not give any glucose orally, right? Establish IV access, right? Give dextrose D50. If you cannot get IV access immediately, you could give IM glucagon. Glucagon, just so you guys know, it's going to come in a powdered form and you have to reconstitute it with sterile water. I have been on calls with paramedics who were certified paramedics who tried to draw powder with a syringe, right? So make sure you reconstitute it first. What I mean by that, you take that sterile water, you mix it with the powder, you shake it, and then you draw it up in the syringe. If you put a syringe to draw powder, you're not going to get any glucagon,